A project, or the project which we're working on, that will be about comics, and you are one of the very established scholars in comic studies. So perhaps you could outline briefly what your major interest in comics is, what your focus and research is about that medium.
Sure. Okay, so I've been working in comics for about 15 years. That followed a 10-year stint in photography and fiction. I ran out of things to say about that, and so decided to turn towards comics. I'm interested in documentary comics in a broad sense, so comics that are based in the real world. I've done work in graphic memoir, graphic medicine, graphic journalism, graphic historiography. I've taken various approaches, a little bit because I get bored very easily. So I did some narratological work, especially on focalization, but I've also done work that's more culture-based, questions of truth, persuasion, media-based, how media informs us, changes us, moves us to do all sorts of things through the medium of comics.
So, do you have any specific approach, a methodology or theory which you think is kind of rather appropriate for an understanding or for the examination of comics?
Wow, that's a big question.
Any preferences?
I do think that one thing that comic scholars definitely need to know is how to read images. I think because comic scholars tend to come from many different disciplines, they may have a light knowledge of how to read images and focus just on narrative, questions of narrative and storytelling. And I do think because the form is multimodal, I do think a firm understanding of how images work is really, really important to the reading of comics. As for methodology, I think it depends on what you want to know about what you're asking of these books. There's many methodologies adopted. Like I said, I've taken a somewhat structuralist methodology in the past. Today I'm moving strongly, full-heartedly into an intermediate methodology, again to understand how these images and storytelling practices of comics move across media. I think there's very productive work to be done there.
Right. Speaking of images, I mean, just in recent years, images massively moved, transferred into the digital realm and into the kind of not so anymore so new media, but the new realm of a completely different space of media communication, etc., etc. And then, I mean, one thesis is that comics in this light are quite a yesterday medium, quite an outdated medium. So how would you respond on that?
I don't think mediums become so outdated as quickly as people think. I think look at photography, for instance. We still take photographs in the exact same way. We still archive our photographs. So we may not make family albums, but I suspect some of us do. Some people go on vacation and then they get someone else to make the family album, but the family album is still there. So uses don't change very much. And I think the same holds true for comics. I don't think it's outdated. On the contrary, I think it's exploding. I think countries that have undervalued comics as a cultural form of communication have now revisited that. I know comics are changing policy. I definitely know it's changing healthcare practices. Comics is a medium that appeals, that renders difficult topics a little bit more approachable, while showing gore also, that's important. So in news comics, if you will see the blood, the dead person, whatever, bad things, gory things, that were they to be shown on television, you would turn away. So that grants readers access to an experience that would otherwise simply be much vaguer or more distant, perhaps. So I don't think they're going out of fashion. I don't think they're outmoded. I think they're doing the complete opposite.
Right. So now, I mean, you're working on new plans for new endeavors in research. Could you perhaps outline your current ideas on what this research might be about?
That's a big question because Jörn is at the head of this multidisciplinary project on comics. We don't have a firm project yet. What we have is a firm research team from Poland, from Spain, Canada, and here in Gießen. So, yes, Italy is in my team, so I'm going to put him in Canada. But yes, also Italy. So the team, by team I mean the principal investigators, then we'll draw from various countries. The idea is to go across some of the genres in comics, so review a broad range of comics, from superhero comics to the documentary comics that I was talking about, and alternative comics, but also to do a broad range of geographical locations, precisely because comics do different work depending on how they're perceived by the countries in which they are being read and consumed and produced. Also, production is an important part of all that. With this group, we hope to find a question of really what kind of cultural work comics do. How do comics motivate, change, illuminate, move to real action, and try to, so we will have these teams on individual projects. My team will be looking, hopefully, on journalism and the use of photography in journalism to try to answer why did journalism start in periodicals? That's a new field for me, so I'm going towards periodicals now. Why did comics serve, obviously, at the beginning of journalism, a very, very important function of illustration. Then photography, with the invention of photography, they turned to photography, but then they turned back to comics. So this is a very interesting case study of why did comics be deemed more important or more effective, really, because it's also a production decision than photography, which people would say is more real, more truthful, better based in reality. So
then in a nutshell, the question is about the contemporary legacy of the comics medium.
That's right.
And its ability to intervene into present discourses.
That's right.